Vitaly, friends, I am Vitaly Portnikov. We are with you before the broadcast. I am Yaki. All our heirs of the rest are not so highlighted by the so-called SOAP process and the SOAP plan of the American President Donald Trump. I'm on the self-discerned under that document. I am today where you all are in the media, and I am known. Looking at myself, this is how the information leaked out. You are all on your own according to the informed. You are a mirror of journalists. Contacts in the corridors of Vlad on himself about the Ukrainian, and it became obvious that really Ukrainian Vlad was numb in the fact that such information was announced in the Ukrainian media, that the president of Ukraine was young to journalists. And we are extremely with the Namagini on himself will understand his position according to Trump's plan. And the fact that he hangs out away from the intelligence podi, tied from the intelligence plan and to American and Ukrainian zustrichi from journalists, and when hiring a Ukrainian position. Well, here you can talk sense into more positions. The whole territory of the Donetsk region, and the situation is tied up because of the Paris nuclear power plant, because of the status. Calling the American peace plan a set of documents. I am rich in tortures, not finalized to the fact that it is rich yet to lay the foundation about the plan. I have overgrown them 20 points, we already know the good. 20 points of the plan, Yaki I know. So it's different. Out of 128-point plan, in publicly on its axis. I can understand you and I for the initiatives on the part of the Russian side. More ultimatum dates on Maya, yak on the seams to conclude it to please. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt has his drain. Pete chairs are still President Trump in that, and the whole rasmo of oysters and concrete days. But it can be understood at once. There is also an oyster of some kind specifically, so the Russians did not extort it back in the Ukrainian army. Went beyond the territory of the Donetsk region. We know that Ukraine does not take this position. That's the American compromise. The Americans call the Vilna Economic Zone, and the Russians call the Demilitarized Zone. The fact that the Ukrainian troops out of all territories of the Donetsk region and Russian troops throughout the visits. Ukraine is on the verge of freezing along the current line of demarcation, and the Papal troops, then another Ukrainian proposition, is that Ukrainian troops are leaving the territory of the Donetsk region controlled by us, and Russian troops are leaving the territory of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and firm the point of view of the Constitution of Russia. In the administrative cordon of the Donetsk region, a subject of the Russian Federation. I don't understand. I am Kim Chin, Russians in Zagoli, that the territory I did not write down in the Constitution was a free economic zone and a demilitarized zone. I respect the fake-sounding game of Russian President Putin, the pre-illuminated Carter, and the source with to a mater Stephen with, and Jared Kuchno. And Sturbova is a phrase that I will embroider the food of the territory and the people of Ukraine in the elections of the referendum. I am not, of course, I am Kim Chin. You can cure this and nutrition in the elections, because on these that you vote for a politician. I stand for such territories, and I will be removed by the President of Ukraine, and on you vote for a parliamentary bill. Allegedly, I will stand for the fact that the trouble is these territories of Russia. Prices will automatically mean, even those areas scrolls, falls to the Ukrainian constitution. And we are with you on the legal aspects of history, which we understand perfectly. In principle, There are no territories in the Constitution of Ukraine. A unitary state, not a federation, not a skin federation. There are laws of foreign territories. As we know, there are no such laws in powers with autonomous, say, warehouses. What is the problem with the rich political rats in Spain? In that even, say, Catalonia wanted about the legitimate referendum, and Spanish law, and Ukrainian legislation. And with such a rank, in order to hold a legitimate referendum on the kind of cream from the territory. As I have already explained once again, it is necessary to do everything yourself so that everything becomes a constitutional norm. In order for this to become a constant norm, supposedly, of course, it is necessary that they are visible in the Constitution. Then, with the cob for the military idea. To pass 2 sessions of the Verkhovna Rada. There will be no fights, there will be no amendment to the Constitution. I will not spend the past on the territory. And about the fact that those territories are still a referendum in Zagoli can praise such decisions. There is a need in not up to the constitution of the article and the Ukrainian territory of treason for a Shlyak referendum. And there will be a need for the constitution itself parameters of such a referendum. Tell me, but supposedly respects. And in those territories, it will be able to hold a referendum in the Crimea, in the Luhansk and Kherson oblasts. So, David. Well, here are 2 sessions of parliament, and a referendum in those regions, and the parliament implements the referendum decision. Well, I'm already going to punish what the implementation itself marks. It can be seen on the court. Choke on sprat from underwater. Well, really. I think myself and who, having said that the Ukrainian parliament will vote for the rights to the constitution. The strategics allowed the gentry of the referendum to leave the territory of Ukraine. And that it can end up on 4 areas. I'm already a horse-drawn mechanism. And who said that I still deputies of the Verkhovna Rada really will praise such norms. Ukrainians will go to the polls for a referendum. Wait for the fact that Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporozhye region are very common in Ukraine. And who, having said that he is a stylish court on articles about the referendum and promo, does not mean the subject of the very spirit of the Ukrainian constitution. And who said that the deputies of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine to praise the decision. I am implementing the decision of the referendum, the decision for a positive result in the territory of Ukraine. And who, having said that he really praises the deputies of the Verkhovna Rada and the decision. You will also see the Ukrainian constitution. And everything is needed for Rocky's discounts on the chain. But you can, of course, in the end, that the tribune of the Ukrainian parliament and say, Donetsk Oblast are finds nothing. Obviously, absolutely nothing will change. I'm still Donald Trump will come out and say that with the received states will recognize the Crimea. Donetsk region are often on the Russian Federation. The fact that American law and can be mowed down by the president with the received in the state. And we will cut out, yet Vladimir Putin knows nothing. Well, I am a lawyer, law faculty however, at St. Petersburg University, and Vitaly for Putin. And there is a chick, and discounts are needed for a retinue, and you can discounts are needed for an hour. For such to complete the military so far, for holding elections before Parliament, for 2 sessions of Parliament, for a court decision, for a referendum, for 2 parliaments, for a decision of the Equestrian Court. And in the Constitution of Ukraine I will look like this. Reaction, think about it. Putin is just a physical lad for another hour, no longer young. I will already punish about the pace. It may be that they were not caught on the Tilka by Donald Trump in the 2029 kind. To sew up his political career, or maybe even earlier. We don't know how they will develop. And that president of Ukraine has been removed from the upcoming elections, which may be a prerogative for the president of Ukraine. Of course. And you are a test to Putin for what? And let's also say that the Parliament of Ukraine cannot grasp the vision of the article. The people of Ukraine will still vote for Putin about the referendum. Practical chair speaking for the territorial Ukraine. You can't please the guilt of the mortgages article in that Ukrainians vote about the fact that the trouble to the Donetsk-Lugansk, Kherson, Zaysky region of Russia is a kind of guarantee for them, not, and a new guilt begins. Here. Next. In Trump's plan, you will open a kind of Trojan from Kharkiv, Sumy to Dnipro regions at the Kherson Zaporozhye, you add. We are, of course, behind the words of the reasons for the frozen territorial conflict. This means the continuation of the war. Pitany, and why? Why else does Russia respect its subjects? Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporozhye region. And Crimea. Why are the Ukrainian troops withdrawing from the Donetsk region and for the Kherson region? For what is the Kherson Zaporozhye region rough for Donetsk? And I'll tell you what. The fact that the Russians need to win the operational prostration without a fight for the startup, our Ukrainian region. And it can't be obvious that Ukrainians will take buckets for the search, and the Kherson regions have already come that night. The Russian army is not in a dose of disbanded conclusions on Ukrainian screeching. From the territory to the compensation, Ukrainian troops will still be overstated on Kherson, even in Zagoli. Someone in the Kremlin seriously thinks props in the fire and durable. Because the very thesis about the conclusions of the Ukrainian in the territory of the Donetsk region can be ensured. For the destabilization of the situation in Ukraine and the occupation of Ukraine. PPR of a nuclear power plant. The Russians are extremely fond of having a nuclear power plant under their control, and the Americans are taken and saw control. Saw control again, and with whom? With the Ukrainian and Russians. And I will look out on the occupied Ukrainian territory. The Americans will mate a split consortium with the occupying power. And I'm still a science in the occupied territory. The Americans will be a reasonable Ukrainian. If cotton wool is for the nearest nuclear power plant, then you can know everything about the Russians. And you can tell the Russians that I fought on the territory of the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. Trump's people hacked Roshi. For what reasons? That Putin with greed there I do not know, Trump in greed. Even now, Trump needs American troops for high, and is fighting with the Russians. And why Putin is so easy to see them, and there Putin also looked at the sprats from the Russian temples, from the pennies of electricity. In my everyday life. Well, the Tesh torture is overstated from absolutely logical. Oh. Europeans need to stay in the city through the testing of frozen assets and in the stupas of Ukraine in the European Union. I still seek to assign Ukraine will become a member of the EU. The United States will emerge on the European Ukraine. So they are not boring blocks is the entire company, but are still such behavior mechanisms. There it turns out that you choose the date 2020 Rick. The whole beautiful date. I'll give you more of this kind of water. On me, Trump will also tell Viktor Orban that something is not about Ukraine before the European Union. Wallpaper just in Vlad's favor in the available parliamentary elections would still be on. And Ukraine has not repaired the real process with the European Union. In the history of the European Union, there has never been a situation in which a power for the Reich closed all these clusters. I have already punished the fact that Tilk, the you now these will protect their economical positions. And Ukraine will defend their economical positions. There is still that we're not going to do this Sahim. We can join the European Union on mind. Our economy for Sprat, we mark discounts rocky, let's say about our Polish subsidies fought with the European Union for subsidies. Even before the imperious rural state, it could just not be you its competition in the European Union. And I absolutely am not myself yet means to write a date. I'm Kim Chin. Then the Americans will embroider from all of Ukraine to the European Union, on the I'm still in those are so pleased to appoint. And here I am now in the European Ukraine of Vlad politics, and let's say they will be like that. On the final alignment with absolutely no infection. Well, it is known that since getting the state, Ukraine does not want to join NATO, and here they have a consensus with the Russians. And we know one of those consensus between the two ultra-rightists and administrations on the political scene today. Early on, the United States and Ukraine respected what was needed from the cob of the corn in the fire of the Ugoda. Overgrown with the receipt of the United States came to the Russian position. It is clear to say that Trump and he are playing in President Putin's Anchorage team. Popova Pripy in the fire may be the prescriptions of the frame year. That so absolutely did not understand. The frame of the agreement can be negotiated and the whole term of Donald Trump's stay in the White House, which does not want to be extracted from the cob propa on it in the fire. And we will try to fight for our own minds. This is also Trump MRI about the Nobel Prize. Here the same thing is absolutely obvious. I'm on an energetic and marine reception. She enlisted the support of Ukraine. With the receipt of the states. President Trump said, and President Erdogan still needs a lot of that's what Tesh stuck to. And the most Russian look at the fact that you happen and actually give the Russians to continue this attack on the Ukrainian energy sector. Well, even before the plan signed, the real Ukrainian army 800,000 military service. Behind the Ukrainian federal headquarters, the TK overestimates the fact that with such a proposition, the Russian Federation plans to further conquer Ukraine. And so the name of the demilitarization of Ukraine overestimate the importance of frequent Russian you could still dopa. Here. TPPR was torturing the Russian position, even before the Russian status in the Russian Church. Nutrition, either Russian Church is protected by Russians on our land. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate itself insists that it is not the Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, and does not directly respond to the torture of journalists, saying that I am not betting on such torture. I will see European legislation. Well, it's practical that we see the president of the ARPA accounts of the most soapy plan. I would today on well. His details there were on the issuance of a mirror to my colleague Tatiana Strength. I would say a detailed publication. That's where there's no talk about exactly what's going on with getting the state of Ukraine, Russia, Europe. Still, Europe Sarasmile, I will not be respected, the European Union in the UK. Win not the control of the Russian Federation over Crimea, Lugansk regions. Even if such a control has not been realized, then there will be signatories councillors, all the territories of Russia are often repaired by reason. Tell everyone the status of those territories cannot change it with a diplomatic nobleman, and not I. Having told you in detail about the so-called buffer zone in the Donetics of the region. It is said that Ukrainian and Russian troops will be stationed behind the administrative cordon. I will need you behind the administrative cordon from the Ukrainian country, and behind the Russian one, behind this cordon. That's good nutrition. For the Paris-Kherson region, as I have already mentioned, they are overestimated in those situations. In those positions, on their temples. Here. About politics, and if I tell you the same thing. I absolutely did not understand who would be imperious from the American point of view of 100 in a consortium. In terms of Trump, Russia has not talked yet, and I, of course, are not important to her until the date. Before what I say is fixed, not the accession of Ukraine to the alliance. It is clearly stated that with the receipt of the NATO staff, I will not expand and will not request Ukraine statues. Yaki Ministry Zakordona right of the Russian Federation, you with received in the state of Ukraine in NATO, OG 2020 other. The attack on Ukraine. And here is a good torture. Yakim rank those will not be given to Putin, and the ranks of Putin are still an offensive president. With just President Donald Trump received in the state. Sasha, this is how I will end my political career in 3 rocky years, and in fact, 3 inglorious rock and Trump have ended in 2020 she, 2020, 2028. We can see the collapse of the ultra-right forces, with the economic catastrophe received in the states and laid out by their incompetent and competent management. Otherwise, it's lucky that the ultra-right in just I'll show more competent. And out and our Americans will vote. And we know that people vote. So Tesh is a torture for discounts to Vlast and Putin. I don't think about Trump at a time. I will simply say that Putin is demanding, and from everyone for the rest of Russia, even before an imperious. It's a good torture. As long as President Trump is up to Putin. And in my mind, I was talking about the Ministry for Russia in the 2021 lesson. Right from the receipt of the state of Ukraine, Monato brother, but dropped from the territory of Ukraine. And became a member of NATO 1997. And Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia cleaning, Bulgaria, Romania, Macedonia, Slovenia, Croatia, and Montenegro. Appears in the bathhouse to Yavit Tilke with. The whole thing is just like that, I would say not randomly. More than once I haven't had whiskey for Donald Trump. She would have said that it was a striptease. Here. Guarantees to infect them all, and I did not die. Donatovskaya, the 5th article of the guarantee, I honestly do not understand. And I think you don't understand what that means. The fact that we are NATO icon in the 5th article, the thickets of the receiving state, to protect Ukraine's European warranty. And my guarantees from the date, and from the receipt of the NATO staff are Europe. And there's an idea. Russia will invade Ukraine, exiles Voskovi vidpovidiet, and completion of all sanctions. I'm not asking. I haven Ukraine is in Russia, she spend all their guarantee. The same thing that our Ukraine is not provoked, I will fire at Russian territory. I'm still Russia will fire at Ukraine. The guarantees of our Ukraine are overstated in force, and about the sanctions. The shooting is absolutely beyond reason, which means that someone is not guilty of Russia. You decided to bomb everything here about the attack. I don't think it's just spelled out. Here. And I realized in the dark document that it was not my word of guarantee. There is a word, and the word is the same as the word DB memoranda. Here it does not mean anything. And the Ukrainian side wants the document to be ratified by Congress, and Trump has not yet. Allegedly, there will be no Congress. Ostensibly, of course, still on my word of honor. And this test is not about the honest word of President Trump, the torture of what we are talking about ending our political career. And finding it in the wrong form, she can continue it for a long time. And do you know that I'm still Donald Trump getting received in the states and dictatorships, and will be a later president with received in the state. But all the same, nature in its own way, you know, with the resulting staff, you can deduct a smaller president. Donald Trump can think. American democracy is absolutely not those situations, as we understand. I will also work for the president with a degree received in the state. So absolutely smoke. With the receipt of the states will help Ukraine, overnight deliberate and travelly. Well, of course you are still on the truth, here after all us. For tore us off for 4 months. I find that I am a deliberate and unintentional person. Well, the yacht of the Russian army went on and did not enter Ukraine intentionally. You horseshoe Zablu column marks Russian wiki Zablu column on our territory. To the absolute madness of it is important that NATO members of Ukraine have an invisible part on European stability, and are engaged in a single streaming position. Here. So NATO is not accepted here. France is not marked in the UK. Finland is Polish, as if it means that European and 20-hand membership are frequent. I have already told you. Bad speech. I am absolutely ready for EU membership. Well, again, they gave it there, and until often tied up firm, it is visible in Ukraine. They are often because I am not sure, and it is seen that the prospects are completed. And it is clear that the fund of $200 billion also wants to create with the received states. Here. Russian assets are unfrozen, and in the form of Ukraine, not without Europe, of course. Well, that's it, and there's still a long-term plan. Here is a special year from Russia. Well, here I am, as they say about the fact that I will not be Ukraine in NATO. I will not be in NATO in Ukraine. My Russia is integrated into the Russian economy, into the light economy, turned into Vysenka at a Lushny hour. To sign with the received states, and please about economically Russia. Maya dates of fun not to invade before their subsidies and legislation to fix the policy on the attack. Look smoky because the legislation will fix the policy on Napad. And we know perfectly well that Russia has fixed the policy of attacking in the hall of legislation. It also protects. He says they protect. They were attacked by Ukrainian Nazis. Well, it looks like it's being treated with documents. I'll tell you honestly, amateur. You can also say that the effects of documents in are already important. And you can negotiate for a long hour until the lawyer consumes them in his hands. Here I am to you in a situation with the territorial corporeality of our Ukraine. And a referendum cannot be destroyed in the logic of the rank of the constitution of our state. 1 hour is needed for the implementation of all speeches. I'm a made-up lawyer. I think you are a lawyer, that the wires are so and breaking for you. Let's hang on richly, I would say, the pitfalls in some skin pro positions of the plan. So the moment has absolutely dawned on the topic. Here, in principle, is a short look, documents and comments for him, by the President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. I ask you, those who are on the air, subscribe to the channel. We are with you, these ethers wires on Tilkey per hour toothless. A channel can become a channel of millions. 4,500 have been completed in order to channel the channel into millions. I ask you, those who have not subscribed to the channel on the air, sign up, get up often on these 4,500. Put it in a padobake so that the dish is light at once. Gatherings could you, and what do you think, and a new twist with Trump's mayoral plan. Well, the Constitution knows all the tools of the channel. We took a contagious pitney-like, and have come broadcast on the part of the attempt. I'm not going to help Russia yet, I'm going to change my bets in Taiwan, and I'll do everything. And why it is to help Ukraine and Russia, I do not understand, its strategic partner. And to Taiwan, the Taiwan test in that row, I'm there in the army of Gudao, started with the general. There have been frequent changes in the power policy of the People's Republic of China since its creation. But you, of course, a simple personal one, cannot ignore historical and political realities. Vlada the Chinese, Vlada at the Gromadyanskaya Winnie. Vlad Taiwan, Vlad, you are a huge war, and in China about the count. And a long hour was overestimated legitimately caused by the number, and the whole civilized world, right up to the trip of Richard Nixon. Henry Kissinger Mao Zedong. Yak, in your opinion, do you call the army to China? But a Russian vac. The Ukrainian People's Army has been called out to China. What is the People's Liberation Army to China? She is there the Chinese Sovereign Army, the People's Army. The fact that it does not end in the voluntary poet of the People's Voluntary Army to China, may end in a tilka from Taiwan of those who are about the Hromadian War. That Taiwan is not a great power here at once. Taiwan, the entire territory on the alternative Usiga to China. She is the president of Taiwan Jurid. I am the president of the Republic of China, the president of the Republic of China. With China, and it turned out, he is in the chair of the head of the People's Republic of China. Nothing will happen, so I haven't had anything there yet. Previously, there was a great power from an economic point of view. I was not of interest to the call, but began to represent, and began to sell cheap products. Extremely and ambitions Taiwan, and the Chinese small ambitions Taiwan. This is international politics, and the whole history of the bag, the whole history of the raid in locally. And I do not understand that China is helping Russia in his Russia, firm a political influx of entry. Firm an imperious political influx in Russia, in Europe, China, into the priests of patriotism. In the people of blame for adoration, and vice versa, starting with lip descendants. Supposedly this is an hour gap for us. I do not know, we are serving. Of course, so is Borodeba about the mind. We are envious. Our economy is marooned by guilt. I am a functionary of an enviable economy. Zahid. We are our own I to the power. We are not a giant Galosui inflation. We have an army of Baron on their territory. In order for a real hour-long interlude to begin, peoples need to live in ruins, I can't tell you. Actually, I look reactions. Of course. Individual speech. I will historically cut up to the people. I am ready to end up with self-destruction of the warehouse to the enemies, which is not the potential of people who are ready to exchange freedom for surrender. I show the worship of theology in the Ukrainians, who have been slaughtered. So absolutely speech. I would say that the politicians can begin, and the policy people did not get up. So I am a counselor of nature policy. And a natural politician, and his political tasks as a nobleman of political work. Head yaks policy with adoration mats Vlad for snakes. I want to bring my own to my own. I also adore a politician, she already knows the students. I decided that they would not be lawyers, but deputies of the governing bodies of the Conservative Party. That they will be engaged in a preschool legal practice. I'll be in Parliament. What they will do in the press and speak firm the parliamentary rostrums. Ticka and the laws. For me Nicola was not ticked. I know all the peoples already and in the jurid. I in my childish darkness had all the laws of Ukraine extremely since 1917th rock, then 20th. I've read it, I'll tell you honestly that it wasn't worth it. And I didn't have Nicola. I am not but the laws of the idea of someone else, the laws and the politician. Politics is a valuable tweak seriously, 4 rich years working with documents, and policies with documents I called. He was retained until the date of his reference work. With documents and politics well, so we can showman in the presidential office in Ukraine results. Crash, 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 crash. In Voronezh, the result. That's it. So the adoration of Vlad's mats, against the documents of the reform of political days and national work. Stay with the deputy minister, with the minister deputy prime minister, with the prime minister. Candidate for the presidency of the parliament. And it seems to be forever, and political principles and look. So the policy is extremely rich and will bring their elections before the crash. And we will contact you and participants. We are such scroll situations and catastrophes ourselves, believe me. I'm still ultrally will be able to with Trump, and in the presidential election, and for all the test of Ukraine. Will be in solidarity with Trump, maybe even Dick. He is right that Trump is just introducing the importance of elections and democracy to the Republicans of Ukraine. It can be removed from the ultra-right massacre by looking at loved ones. And even before Ukraine, the mass of American elections in the parties and the choice was insignificant in principle. Absolutely the same position is taken on the attempt of Russian-Ukrainian guilt. The torture of Russian-Ukrainian guilt on each other, and on the third on the torture of American politics. Americans have elections and a voice of economical interest, painted with imperious goodness. These are the norms for a new retinue. And the way we say that leaving will be such a position and say, but I Trump can allow it so Ukraine. It's also you who are busy. What do you say to seeing off Trump for a group with a rub-in with getting the state of Russia, China, India, Japan? But this is a terrible idea in the White House, and has already said that the president with a staff in Nicola, he elected everything. And I showed up. I don't think, to be honest, that Japan already wanted to be a member of such a group. And the resulting states will actually be the new BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and the Beer African Republic. There's just Donald Trump in the role of Maya Buta's Beer African Republic and Ramaphosa for the poor. On the minimals of Ramaphosa, I would say, I am still a democracy about me in alternative models. I will not be in a gap on populism, and alternatively in a beard of authoritarianism. I am also a democracy about a single alternative model, tyranny, authoritarianism, and a bend. Tens in a million people at the third light vein. Scrolls, and maybe victims. Victims, I'm not going to tell you lies, the victims that you have become. Democracy is a war of autarky among themselves. Then we will still be with you. Democracy is not about I won, yet. All these authoritarian tendencies will end with the collapse of their seemingly Washington to Moscow, and I will leave. And we will be able to stream attack of authoritarianism. Yaki chances that President Prima I do not know the test. I respect that the president will not be primate for her simple reasons, they will be started for him. Well, I would say that. It's not just Vladdy who thinks about a political catastrophe, although I think he thinks seriously. His political image. And the fact that our European allies, you do not remember, correct the position of the president. And there may be a president in the niche, a direct, I think, Russian scheme, and Russia is not that, and Ganba, and fault. Of course, what is the essence of our truth? You could not Takanini the guilt, although rich obivate, or maybe to think differently, and pay Suda. Hundreds of you could be on Putin's side, so that we would open both the persecution and the war in an hour. And indeed, if the Russian army can fight for the occupation of new Ukrainian territories, it is effective. Then it will be possible to talk about Putin's Dasha plan, and maybe even a different way. Flustered. In such, I said, a folding moment with the Trump administration's disc. All of us, are blurring. Even Trump is fighting Zustrichi for the Rada Zustrichi still, and for Putin. Well, and the whole situation, we are perfectly well aware that we are going to get serious problems in the Ukrainian body. Tied up with the sovereign body, I am on the was. Absolutely clear. Well, before the speech, the one whose statement of President Zelensky about the situation associated with the choice. We are ready to fight with President Trump in the format I'm still President Trump talks more about the elections in Ukraine. I want to say absolutely we can try and hold elections. This is still a seeming need. We are here in Ukraine, dear, my America also speaks, with the Russian side. In principle, elections are still hanging out here. We are perfectly fine with you, of course, there are still elections. It is possible to carry out Tilky, still completed guilt in the fire, and without a check. And Putin is meeting today with General Gerasimov, the chief of the general staff of the dropped forces of the Russian Federation. And tell him to continue the military idea. And I want to tell you what kind of uprising months of the same P on Putin's Rada for 2.5 months. On Putin's Rada with Vyskov. And now the temples in beer form of combat. I think I'm just showing that Tilky is elected to end this war. Trump is energetic and ready to fight. It's obvious that Trump is energy. And the ticks of the developed plot, of course. I think that tomorrow now will be on the details of the process. Absolutely all the same, and having shown that I already respect, I'm still up to the 14th 15th breast. I think we have already completed something else. Hanukkah is already beginning. Hanukkah begins with us, and Trump has adopted Judaism in our quiet Renisha. Trump saint will wake up Tilky on the 24th breast. And you and I are all overgrown. We begin to write sheets together, Vitaly, Ivan, Trump, and Jared Kushner's man. And asked for Hanukkah more. Maybe we should get this bomb. So let's you think. Hanukkah is our important ally. What we've all been living about. Diakuyu. Overestimate the topic of the channel, subscribe to the channel. You know that millions in an hour are still about up to 4,500 subscriptions. Do not comment on what you think about the different mayors process. Well, it is known by the channel's tool in the niche. I'll tell you, yes, it helps the dumped forces of Ukraine about the assemblies. That you are therefore the process of the most reset power of Ukraine is overstated by the head guarantor of our. I am ashamed of you now.